Hello folks, and welcome to this online presentation, which is all about how COVID-19 has changed our world and what it's going to do for us forever after. So it's a little bit about what's happening now, but more than that, as a futurist, I think that I can give you an insight into how it's changing our world forever. So let me start with a story. A few years ago, when I was when travel was a thing, I was traveling to Perth from Sydney, coming back home, and I was in the Qantas terminal at Sydney Domestic Airport, and I took this photograph. And the reason I took this photograph is you can see here that there's big advertising in the Qantas terminal for GoToMeeting. So this is before Zoom was really big, but Qantas was advertising GoToMeeting and a whole bunch of other things, of course. And the reason I took this photo was I thought, isn't it interesting? Here's Qantas, who's advertising for one of its biggest competitors on its property. And it was in the terminal, it was upstairs in the lounges, and it was everywhere. Now, Qantas, of course, doesn't see it that way because for them, their competitors are other airlines, and they would never allow Virgin to advertise in the Qantas terminal. But a big part of an airline's revenue, if you think about it, is bringing people who live a long way apart together for meetings. And isn't that exactly what GoToMeeting and Zoom and WebEx and Teams do as well? Now, I've shown this picture to a number of people in the last few years, and pre-pandemic, people would look at it and go, it's quirky and it's kind of interesting, but how relevant is it? Because what could possibly happen that we'd all not be doing travel anymore and we'd all be meeting online? And that's yet exactly what's happened. And it's one of the things that's changed in our world because the way that we look at priorities, the way that we look at getting things done has changed in very big ways. And that's really what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how the world has changed and what's changing for us forever after. So just a couple of little housekeeping things, but really in how you engage today. So I definitely want to give you some things to think about in the next 45 minutes that we've got together. I want you to be a bit playful. I've got some exercises for you. There'll be a chance for you to chat with me, to chat with other people, to think for yourself, but also to participate today. So this is not only about things that you can take away and put into practice later, I hope you do, but there's a chance for you to engage in the next 45 minutes as well. So do whatever you can to avoid any other interruptions and distractions and participate fully. But I do want you to get some things that you can take away and put into action as well. So many people here do know me. Looking at the list, there are some people who know me, but some people who don't. So for the people who don't, just very briefly, I'm a futurist. I've worked a lot with organizations around Australia and around the world. I don't want to tell you a lot about me here. You can, if you want to find out more, you can look at my website and find out about the work that I do and the sort of clients I work with. But particularly now, what I'm doing a lot of is helping leaders as they're trying to navigate this global crisis that we're facing. So let me take you back to a couple of other times in our history when we've had plagues like this or viruses like this. Now, this is not a history lesson, and I'll go through this pretty quickly, but it's useful to see how things like this changed our world in the past. So in the 15th century, the Black Death spread throughout the whole world. It ravaged entire populations, mostly in Europe, which was very densely populated, but it went through the whole world as well. As a result of that, some things changed. There's a bit of a myth that the plague or the Black Death caused the Renaissance. It's not actually true. The Renaissance followed it, but it wasn't as a result of it. But there were some other things that did happen. For example, as a result of so many people dying, there was a labor shortage after the plague ended, and that meant that peasants who were working for serfs and lords and landowners, they had more power because they said, if you don't give us better working conditions, we'll move away. And the lords had nobody else that they could employ, so it actually changed the dynamic between employers and employees, and it just completely changed the power dynamic of that market. Another power dynamic that changed was the power of the Catholic Church. It actually diminished after the plague because people found that, sadly, their God didn't come and save them and their families and their communities. And so people started becoming a little bit more skeptical about religion in their lives. More recently, but still 100 years ago, we had this thing that was called the Spanish flu. It actually didn't come from Spain. It came from the US probably, but it came around the time of the First World War. And at that time, because there were so many countries involved in the war, there was this flu epidemic that was also that was going around at the time. But many of the countries who were involved in the war didn't want to publicly say that there was this virus spreading through their country as well, because it would make them look vulnerable. Spain wasn't involved in the war, and they were okay with publicly reporting what was happening with this virus, and so it became known as the Spanish flu. We don't hear much about it now, but only because it happened at the time of the First World War as well. So you hear about the war, but you don't hear much about the Spanish flu, of course, until last year. As a result of the Spanish flu, 100 years ago, we have a couple of things that have changed in our society. So we have this concept of socialized healthcare was a new concept at the time. So the idea that it's not only you that's responsible for your health, but maybe the community is responsible for your health as well. And you're responsible for the community's health. So it's not just individual anymore. Also, this field of epidemiology, which is all about healthcare in the community, started about that time. Unfortunately, it was also the time we saw a rise of alternatives to medicine, because the traditional scientific medicine wasn't doing its job, or people thought it wasn't doing its job. So all these complementary alternatives, supplementary medicines sprang up at the time. Okay, what does that mean for us 100 years later? And the reason I've called this Forever After is some of these trends we're talking about have changed our world forever. And I've used this picture of paper clips because you think about if you've got a paper clip and you unbend it, so you straighten it out. If you try to bend it back and bring it back to exactly what it was like, the bent shape before, you can never get it to that point. You can never get it perfectly to that point. And that's exactly what's happened now. So however well or badly we're going to manage this coronavirus pandemic, we will never go back to the way things were. Some things will return to the way things were, but it'll never be the same. And so I want to talk about this in three areas. So one of them is what it means for us as a society. The second one is what it means with accelerating digital transformation. And the third one is what it means for people as individuals. And broadly, I want to talk about this from a business and professional level. So obviously there's some personal implications as well, but let's look at it from a business and a professional level. Now, I could do this by just giving you a lecture about a whole bunch of different trends, and I don't want to do that. So I want to make this interactive and engaging to give you the chance to think about it, to participate with others as well. And so what I'm going to do is, as we go through this, actually, I'm going to share an exercise which comes from a service that I put together for clients. And not many people know about it. And I was speaking to a client about it recently, and he said, "This is fantastic. You should tell more people about this." So I'm telling more people about this. So this is a service that I set up to help people who want to improve their typical team meetings or staff meetings. And originally this client said to me, "We'd love to have you come in regularly and speak at our team meetings, but we can't afford to have you come in, fly in every month to do that." And so I put this together to allow managers and leaders themselves to do this, so that they can run their own meetings and include a little exercise at the start of the meeting around innovation, change, or disruption. And the way, actually, let me show you. So the way we did this was I tried to make it as scripted as possible, but allowing you to put your own flavor to it. So it's called Better Meetings. There are currently 30 modules in there, and we're going to work through one of them together as we go today. And the idea is these modules are all about future thinking, people skills, and productivity and performance. So as we work through today, we're going to go through one of these modules. I'll explain it a bit later. This is a service that you can buy, and I'll tell you at the end how you can invest in that and what you can buy when we do that. But today, what I want to do is we'll do an exercise. One of the exercises from that, it's an exercise called Leverage This, and you'll see it in action. You'll see, like, I'll facilitate this, but the way I've set up the Better Meeting service is that you can facilitate it yourself as well if you're a leader, manager, if you're an HR professional. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do one of the exercises, but don't worry too much about the exercise like how it's set up in Better Meetings. Let's just follow the way that we do it here, and then I'll tell you later how we do it in the Better Meeting service. So typically in the exercise, I would ask you to play a video. So it might be, what's the world going to look like in 2050? Here's one that I'm speaking at the AMA conference next month. So it might be, if I was doing this for AMA in a workshop, we might say, look, here's some innovations in healthcare, have a look at that. And then the next step is to like break up in little groups and really figure out what that means for you. And the purpose of this is for you to figure out what does this mean for you. And at 4 levels. So there's a replace, assist, elevate, and transform. Let me explain what those things mean, because it's quite useful to understand. So if you think about this, so there are 4 ways that if you see any new trend or new technology, it could affect you or it could have an impact on you at 4 levels. And this actually, it varies depending on who you are, what your business is, where you are now, and where you see it going for the future. Okay, so the first one is replace. So you might see some technology or some trend or some idea, and you say, this is going to replace what we're doing. And that might mean a change. So it may be that when Netflix saw that DVDs, they were a DVD rental service, and when they saw that streaming was available, they said this is going to replace DVDs, and so they made that transition. Places like Blockbuster didn't. Then the next option, it can assist you, it can help you. So I know, so my next book, Disrupted, is just going to be published in the next couple of weeks. I know that I can type now on a word processor using Microsoft Word better than I can on a typewriter. So that going from a typewriter to a word processor doesn't replace me as an author, but it assists me to write better. The next level is multiplies it. So elevate is a 3rd level. So elevate says that this is going to do something that previously I had to do, or somebody in our team or organization had to do. And now that we don't have to do it anymore because we've got this technology or this idea or this new product, then we can do higher level things. We can do more sophisticated things. So it elevates our ability to serve our customers better. And the last one is transform. Okay, so transform is saying we've seen this new idea, this new trend, this new technology, and this is going to completely change our business or our industry. So not many people will do that. Not many people will become disruptors, but this sometimes happens. And I remember running this workshop with a group of people a couple of years ago in person with a group of leaders from different industries. And when I got them to break up into groups and do this exercise, I remember one table, there was somebody from an insurance company working with somebody else from one of the ports in Australia. And they said, oh, we've come up with this fantastic $1 billion idea that's going to transform our industry. And naturally, they didn't tell us all what the idea was, but they got an idea based on one of the things that came up in this exercise. And you might find the same thing. So as we go through these, I'm going to share 10 trends with you, and think about, can this replace what we do? So we need to do something else. Can it assist in what we do? So it helps us do things better. Can it elevate us to multiply the effect that we have? So we don't have to do this anymore. So we can now do higher level things. Or is there an opportunity for us to disrupt? Okay, so let me do one of them for you as an exercise together, and I'll demonstrate it for you, and you'll understand what I mean by this. So this is QR codes. So remember QR codes? Like QR codes now, everybody in Australia knows what QR codes are because we're using them for contact tracing. QR codes have been around since the mid-1990s. So this is not a new idea, and they've been really big and have been and are big in Asia and other parts of the world. But in Australia, it was new. We didn't really think of it as a mainstream technology until last year. I was talking about it almost a decade ago, talking about this town in Wales that used QR codes around all their places of interest. So if you're a tourist, you snap a QR code and find out about the river, the museum, historical buildings. And Monmouth used to do this, and they set this up a while ago. So they were, they were leading edge at the time. About 8 years ago, I printed a QR code on my business card, and I thought, well, the QR codes are fantastic because people can just scan the card and they go straight to my website. What I found was that nobody knew what they were. They didn't know what they were, they didn't know how to use them, and you needed a special app to be able to scan the QR code. So I took it off my business card. But now that they're mainstream, QR codes are popping up everywhere. This is a little restaurant that I went to for breakfast a few weeks ago, and we went there, and there's a QR code on every table. So you scan the QR code, you just hold your phone to it, scan the QR code, it goes to the restaurant's menu online, and you can pick and choose what you want. You press the button to confirm the order, you pay using Google Pay or Apple Pay from your phone, and it goes to the kitchen. And then they bring you your food. And at the end, you get up and walk out without having to queue up to pay. And it's only possible now because people understand what QR codes are now. And part of the reason is because we've all learnt about them because of contact tracing. The other part of the reason, the other reason for that is that using QR codes has become so much simpler now. 5 or 6 years ago, you needed an app to be able to scan a QR code. And if you've got like the Safe WA app or the Services New South Wales app for contact tracing, you still need that app. But now that's changed. And now your smartphone, the camera app, will recognize a QR code. So if you've got an iPhone or an Android phone, you open the camera app and hold it up to a QR code, and it will automatically detect it. In fact, let's do that now. So just to demonstrate this, so I've got a poll here. It's not a poll; it's actually asking you to type in some words. So the question is, what's your biggest leadership challenge at the moment? And this is a real question. I'd really like to know what your biggest leadership challenge is. And the way we're going to do it is, rather than me opening up a poll in Zoom, I'm going to ask you to pull out your phone, open the camera app, hold it up to the QR code on the screen, and it should take you to the poll page. Now, if you don't have your smartphone handy, then that's okay. You can just go to askgihan.com and type in that web address. It'll take you to the same place. But look, just for the sake of the exercise, if you've never scanned a QR code with your camera before, then it's worth doing. Okay, so just hold it up, scan it to there, or go to askgihan.com. And when you do that, what you'll find is that it'll ask you, what's your biggest leadership challenge? It'll let you put in 3, it says words, but you can put in a phrase if you want to, and then press submit. You don't have to do all 3, you can do 1 or 2 if you want to, but do that, and then we'll see the responses that are coming up. All right, let's see how we're going. Okay, I think I've left that up for enough time for everyone to get to the QR code. Let's have a look what the responses are like. Yeah, right, interesting. Pace of change. So it's interesting, like I've run this over the last year, this question, and the challenges have changed. So mental health was a really big one about 6 to 9 months ago. It's interesting to see some of the things here around productivity. Okay, so thanks for doing that, folks. So my real purpose in doing that, I'm interested in the responses, but as I said, part of my purpose for doing that was just to show you like how easy it is to use things like QR codes. Okay, so as we go through, so that's the first of the 10 things. The next 9 we're not going to go through in as much detail, but if you think about for each of them, what does this mean for you? What does it mean? So QR codes might completely replace some other technology for some businesses. In lots of ways, like contact tracing, it assists people. So it helps you do your job. It helps contact tracing happen faster. Does it elevate? In some cases, does it mean that getting people to scan by QR codes means that you can do higher level services? Possibly for some businesses. And I reckon definitely there's some businesses that have been transformed by QR codes, like the companies in Western Australia, everyone uses the government app, and now I know that's true in New South Wales as well, but it wasn't the case. So there were these companies, when contact tracing became compulsory and mandatory, that cropped up, that they were the ones who were providing the contact tracing apps with QR codes and collecting data, and so it created new business opportunities for those businesses. Okay, so that's an example of how you use this concept. So what we're going to do is go through these 9 areas and looking at how the world's different, and I'm going to give you examples in each, but don't get too attached to the examples. This is not so much about the examples, it's about the examples might trigger your thinking about how this could be useful to you and your business. So let's start with this first area. Okay, so we've got 9 of them to go through. I'm going to go through this in at a reasonably quick pace, because I do want to give you time to then, as we're going through, I want you to think, but I want to give you time later to chat to the other people here about some of the ideas that you've got. All right, let's see how we go. So the first thing is that the world is different now, and let's look at these societal changes. One of them, which is not so easy to recognize when we're going through it, is that we literally are at a turning point in history. So this is, there's a lot of talk about quarantine and hotel quarantine in Australia at the moment. This is what a quarantine camp looked like during the Spanish flu. This is a camp in Queensland. And, we're taking for granted, and we've become complacent, and now it becomes routine that we're doing things like wearing masks and not shaking hands and scanning QR codes. But it is a significant point in history. And a couple of days ago, Tuesday, I went and got my first COVID-19 vaccination, and it was a really painless procedure. The whole thing was done in a very organized way. The most painful bit was just having to wait before, and it was running late, and then having to wait for 15 minutes afterwards to make sure there were no other effects from that. But as I was doing it, I was thinking, here I am, one of the first in Australia, I mean, not way up the top of the first, but among the first in Australia to get this vaccination in this once-in-a-century pandemic. And we're here at this pivotal point in history. And there's no question that people in 50 years and 150 years will be looking back and saying, during the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, the world changed in many ways. So this is just there's no specific idea I want to share with you, but if you're thinking about making a change now and doing something significant, this is a time, we're at a point in history where people will look back and say, this changed the world in so many ways. Okay, another thing that happened was around privacy and the way that I trust in politicians. And it's amazing that if we said 2 years ago that people would be happy to, every time they entered a public venue, they would pull up their phone and register where they were, and the government would have access to that, you'd think we'd say they were crazy. A year ago, when the federal government launched their COVID Safe app, which didn't even do things like recognizing your location, it only tracked the people you were close to for a while to help contact tracers, there's a huge public backlash to that because people thought, it's invasion of privacy, we don't want the government having access to our data. And now we kind of take it for granted that that's exactly what we allow people to do because it's for the public good. So our thoughts around privacy and the way that we think about politics and government has changed, and even in the last year it's changed. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about border restrictions at the moment, particularly international borders, the fact that we're not allowing non-Australians to come into the country, and even now we're not allowing Australians to come into the country. That's only temporary, but that's radical. As an Australian, I can't even leave my own country, and we're pretty much the only country in the world at the moment that's imposed that kind of restriction. But again, it's something that we would have thought that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. As a consequence of that, there have been some really practical impacts within Australia. For example, we have had almost zero population growth. So Australia relies on migration for its economy to grow. It's an absolute requirement that if our economy is going to grow, we need more people coming into the country. Sydney, for example, was anticipating that this year they would have 92,000 new residents in the city of Sydney. So the city would have grown by about 100,000 people. As it turned out, it's grown by less than 1,000 people, fewer than 1,000 new people in Sydney this year. And that's, of course, going to have an impact on the economy. Another thing that has happened in a positive ways for Australia's regions to grow, because people are moving there and have been moving there even pre-pandemic. The Regional Australia Institute says that over the last 5 years, pre-pandemic, net migration has been away from the big bright lights of the city and to the regions, and that only accelerated last year. And things like people being able to work from home, being able to work in safe environments, being able to live in communities that are literally COVID free has made those regions really attractive. As well as because we can't do international travel anymore, and sometimes we're even wary of interstate travel, people are traveling around the regions, and that's helping those regions grow, the tourist areas in particular. Okay, so that's the first area, which is around the way the society's changed. There's a lot more, but I just want to do 3 in each of these areas. The next one is around digital transformation. So KPMG, over at the start of every year, has done this research study where they survey Australian CEOs and they ask them, what are your biggest issues and challenges? You can Google this report and find it. And I've been tracking this over the last few years. And for each of the last 3 years, 2018, 19 and 20, the number one challenge that CEOs had was digital transformation. And the pandemic has only accelerated that, hasn't slowed it down. Many organizations are saying that we've been on this digital transformation path, and COVID-19 has accelerated it by 5, 6 or 7 years. And that affects us all. And it's changed the way that people think about the world, because we haven't been able to connect physically. So we're looking at more ways to connect digitally. Just 3 examples of that. So one is that people want more digital options. Telehealth is a really good example. So telehealth is something that only became mainstream in Australia last year, but it's been big in other parts of the world. In Asia, it's been around for at least 10 to 15 years. And I remember about 6 or 7 years ago, I was speaking at a conference for one of the large Australian private health providers, and I was talking about the fact that telehealth is coming. And it's coming soon. And I was also saying that consumers wanted it. So this is about 7 years ago. Deloitte did some research, and they asked consumers, patients, are you comfortable with doing consultations by email or text? Almost 80% of people said yes. Are you comfortable with your doctor sending you images online and then having a phone conversation with you? Again, more than half the people. Video consults, being able to choose your treatment online based on your doctor's advice. And again, most of the people said yes. But when they surveyed doctors and practices, they said, no, we don't want it. We don't want telehealth because we're worried about privacy, security, confidentiality. There's no Medicare code for it. We have to change our processes and systems too much, and there's really no need for it. So there wasn't a push for it until last year. And now we've got funding for it, and that was a big reason for the push, but the real push came because of the pandemic made it unsafe to go to your doctor to see them in person. Now, telehealth is not going to be the only option, but people are looking for multiple options now. And that's going to happen across all areas of our lives. Another example is in things like online shopping, where not only are we looking for new options that we can look online, we can do click and collect, but also some of the digital alternatives have become a priority now. So traditional retailers may have had a little bit of an online presence, but last year they really had to ramp up that presence. And they were looking at people like social media marketers and influencers, the people that in the past they would have just kind of looked disparagingly at them, and they go, look, they're not a big influencer, not a big part of our market. And now we need to bring them in because we need to attract people to our online stores. So digital became a priority and not just an alternative. And the third one, because I know there are a lot of leaders and HR people here, is that we want better versions of digital. So it's not only that we want digital, but we want it to become even better. So there's some research done last year by the World Economic Forum said that so it's like sadly half of Australians, 48% of working Australians are worried that they won't have a job by the end of this year. And they're turning to online learning to to be able to improve their skills. So online learning has been growing for the last decade. I've been tracking the amount of online learning that's been happening in corporate workplaces and professional workplaces, but also we're now looking at alternatives like virtual reality for online learning. So Walmart in the US, they do a lot of their training of their staff using virtual reality. I've worked with mining and resource companies. They use a lot of VR for training their staff because it's expensive to get them on site and they're in dangerous environments. So they'd rather train them with a virtual reality headset, like a flight simulator for pilots, before they step foot on any site. Okay, what does that mean for you? All right, this third area is what does this mean for us from a personal viewpoint? So personal priorities have changed as well. So first, can I say Happy New Year? Now, you might be going, Gihan, it's a little bit late in the year to be saying Happy New Year. But there's a reason I want to say this, because there's a company called Brandwatch, a marketing company, and they do a survey at the start of each year, and they have been doing it for years, asking consumers and ordinary citizens or ordinary people, what are your New Year's resolutions? And can I say that over the last 3 years before the pandemic, when they did this survey, let me share with you what the New Year's resolutions were from most people. So the most common New Year's resolutions in 2020. So remember, this is before the pandemic hit, so a year and a half ago. And the three most common New Year's resolutions were reduce or give up drinking, eat healthier, and change or improve my job. Okay, so that was at the start of 2020. I'm going to ask you, what are the three for 2021? But before I do that, let me tell you what the top 3 years New Year's resolutions were for 2019. So the year before that, the top 3 resolutions were stop or reduce my drinking, eat healthier, or change and improve my job. What about 2018? Yep, no prizes for guessing. Stop or reduce my drinking, eat healthier, or change or improve my job. Okay, what do you reckon the top 3 New Year's resolutions were for 2021 at the start of this year? So I'm going to ask you in the chat room to share what you think that any of the top 3 New Year's resolutions that people said to Brandwatch at the start of this year. And the hint is they're none of these 3 that were 2018, 2019, or 2020. So Anne says learn new skills, keep their job, get more exercise, more time with family, mental health awareness, completely change how I work, Julia, security. Good, thank you for that. Okay, so these were the 3 from the last 3 years. Yep, okay, so definitely more time with family. 2021 was one of the top 3. The other 2 were read more, which I thought was quite interesting. You had plenty of time for reading, but people felt that was important. And learn new skills, as Anne and a few other people said, was one of the others. Now, it doesn't really matter whether you got those right or wrong, but my point is people's priorities have changed as a result of the pandemic, and they've changed quite radically. It's not just that 1 out of the 3 had dropped out and there's been 1 new addition. It had changed really quite radically. So one of the big things that's changed is a real focus on mental health issues, and many people said that 2020 was the most challenging year for their mental health. And it came because we've had this triple crisis. Obviously, the pandemic's created a health crisis, but as a flow-on effect, we've had an economic crisis and a social crisis. And even if you weren't affected badly by the health crisis in Australia and New Zealand, we weren't, like, compared to the rest of the world. And sometimes even if you weren't affected badly by the economic crisis, because some people weren't, it was perhaps only that you had to work from home or you weren't affected at all. But the social crisis and the fact that it affected everybody has really made a big difference to the whole world. The other thing is that people have thought differently about their workplace, and their workplace now matters more than it used to. And we always used to think of workplace as like a workplace, but people are now thinking about separating the work that they do from the place that they do it. I remember in February last year, so the start of February last year, before the pandemic hit our shores in Australia and New Zealand, I published this blog post, and the blog post was, what if offices didn't exist, or what if they were illegal? And this was just it's a hypothetical question at the time, but I was saying, what would happen if offices were legal and you had to work from different places? And of course, what happened was 6 weeks later, offices were illegal, and some of these things did happen. Now, it's not that I predicted that would happen, but I just wanted people to think differently about their workplace. And now we do have, as a result of this massive working from home experiment, we do have this idea now that we're going to have a hybrid workplace, that people don't necessarily want to work full-time from home. Some people do, but most people don't. They want to work 1 or 2 days a week from home, and the rest of the time they want to work in an office. So they want the best of both worlds. Managers and leaders and HR people are not so keen on that, because they only know how to lead and manage people who are in an office. So for them, it's more difficult to have people away from the office. For employees, being able to work 1 or 2 days a week from home is actually easier. Siemens, who's actually one of my clients, they, in the middle of the pandemic, in July last year, they issued a new edict that said all our staff, all our office staff, can work 1 or 2 days a week away from the office. Sorry, 2 to 3 days a week away from the office, in conjunction with your managers. You have to discuss it, but from now on. And of course, that mostly means work from home, but in the future, it might mean working from co-working spaces or cafes or sitting in a park. So this is going to be a big change for us, and that's going to have important implications for lots of people, and not only for people in offices. It also means that things like CBDs are going to lose some business, and suburban hubs are going to grow. What's that going to mean for your business, your organization? Okay, the last one I want to share with you is that we've got these new microservices. So people who are previously providing a service used to be really expensive, but as a combination of digital and personal, some of those services, which are valuable, have become a lot less expensive. So one of them is a service called Cameo. So Cameo is just recently valued as a $1 billion company, and Cameo allows you to pay for a shout out, a video shout out from a celebrity. And so when I first saw this, I saw that you could get for a couple of $100 Lindsay Lohan recording a 2-minute video for you. And you can imagine, if you're a Lindsay Lohan, if you know somebody who's a Lindsay Lohan fan and they're having a special birthday coming up, you could, buy this as their birthday gift. And like that was kind of towards the top of the range. I was sharing this with some of my speaker friends, and I was saying, oh, you don't need to get Lindsay Lohan. If you want to get me a shout out, Pierre Miranda, who's somebody that I love. You may remember, I'm showing my age here, but you may remember Pierre Miranda from Looking for Ali Brandy, an iconic Australian movie from 2000. I said, get me Pierre Miranda for $45. And one of my mates, Warwick Merry, who some people here will know, the next day he said, oh, look what I found. And here's so he went and splashed out $45 for Pierre Miranda to do a shout out for me. And so even though I knew about this service, it was fantastic to get a personalized 1-minute video from Pierre Miranda saying, Warwick Merry says you're a legend. And so we've got these microservices now. And previously you'd think, why would somebody do something like this for a celebrity? And Pierre Miranda is a pretty well-known Australian actor. For a celebrity to do that, normally there's an agent involved, and there's locations and venues and licenses. And now we've got these microservices. So could you create something similar in your organization, in your business? I've already got ideas about how I could use this sort of idea in my business as well. All right, so we looked at these 3 areas. We've looked at societal, digital, and personal impacts. What I'm going to ask you to do now is I'm going to put you into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes, so put you into small groups of about 3. I hope from the ideas that I've shared that you've got at least one, and that's all I care about. If you get one idea, and remember, we're looking for the ideas in this context of an idea that might replace something you do. It could help you with something you do. It could replace something so you could do something at a higher level, or maybe it's a new business idea. I wanted to share that with other people in the group. And I know when you break into Breakout Rooms. Good, great to see you back. Hope you got something valuable from that. As I said, this shouldn't be this was not much time, but I hope that you don't think of this as the only opportunity you've got. You've got this model now. So if you want to take this idea and say, of these other trends that we've seen, which of these can be applied, it's an easy thing to do. And the other thing I'd suggest you do is that you go to YouTube and you search for something like healthcare trends for 2030, or the future of ports for the next 30 years. I was working with the ports group recently, and we looked at this there, because you'll see some interesting things, and some of them you'll think that's way too far in the future, but some of them you might find ways that you can use them and really put them into practice. Just finally, because as I said, I want to tell you a little bit about the Better Meetings program. So the Better Meetings program is, as I said, this set of packages which you can use to run better team meetings. And it's not for the whole meeting. Each of these is designed as like a little 10 or 15 minute little activity that you can run. So the one that we did around future thinking was about this one called Leverage This. And there's 30 modules in there, and each of them comes with a little tutorial video, and it comes with like a PDF set of instructions for you, so that you can then, let me show you that. So you can scroll and choose which ones you want to run. So there's things around mindset, around thinking ahead to the future, like exponential growth. And the idea is really something that you've got ready-made to share with your team members. And at any of your staff meetings, you can do this. You can say, we're going to run a little exercise around innovation, or around people skills, or about change or disruption. And you can go through and run one of these little exercises. Everything has been based around the idea that disruption is changing our world. So if you're overwhelmed, then how do we manage things? How do we get things done? So that package is available, and you can buy it online. So at the moment, what I've done is I've discounted this package, and I've got another program called Magnetic Messages Online, which is completely different. It's actually for people who are presenting online, and it's not for professional speakers, but it's for typical business professionals who have to do an online presentation, and they don't know how to do things like basic audio and video stuff, but also how to design their slides, how to present data and numbers without overwhelming people. And so I put this online course together. So typically clients buy it from me for use in their organization. And today what I'm doing is I'm combining the two. So normally the Better Meetings package is $3,000, and there's a lifetime license. So there's 30 modules in there now, and every time I add new modules, you automatically get access to them. The clients who've got this and who wanted this said, oh, we'd like to do this once a month. So with 30 modules, you've got more than 2 years worth of material anyway, and it'll keep growing. And also including the Magnetic Messages package, which is a site license for up to 100 people. So if you've got people who are going to give a presentation at a meeting or speak at an event, then you can give them access to this course, and they just go through. It's a 1-hour course, but it's broken up into little modules like, as I said, slide design, showing data, doing data and numbers, how to set up your basic audio and video and lighting and so on. So normally it'd be $4,500, and what I'm doing is just for the next week, by the end of next week, you can sign up. All you need to do is go to bettermeetings.me by the end of next week, by the 14th of May, and just sign up. There's no special code required because I've changed the pricing until the 14th of May, and then it'll change back to the full pricing of $3,000. And of course, it then won't include the Magnetic Messages course. So both of these are lifetime values, so you might as well get in now because you'll have access to them for forever, pretty much. So if you're interested, go to bettermeetings.me and sign up for that. Otherwise, people know that I do a whole bunch of other things like keynote speaking, masterclasses, coaching, and strategic planning. So if you're interested, please get in touch with me. All my details, as you know, for people who've been on these sessions before, you can find out all about that at gihanpereira.com. I hope you got some value from today, and I hope you got some ideas that you can really take away and put into action. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the future. Bye for now.